We are officially on the record at 9 o'clock a.m. Today's date is March 16th, 2023. This is Media Unit number 1 in the deposition of demand means. This deposition is being taken in the matter Michael Meier versus Wauwatosa School Board of Education. This matter is pending in the Circuit Court for Milwaukee County, State of Wisconsin, case number 2022. CV 7524. This deposition is being held at the offices of Carp Iancu, located at 933 North Mayfair Road, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My name is John Sponholz, videographer for Cream City Reporting, and the court reporter is Alice Barbelin. Will counsel please state their appearances and whom they represent, beginning with plaintiff's counsel, and then the reporter will swear in the witness.
Good morning. This is Ben Hitchcock Cross of Cross Law Firm, appearing with and on behalf of Michael Meier.
Attorney Lori Lubinsky from the Axley Brennelson firm, appearing for all defendant/respondents.
If you raise your hand, I'll swear you in. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. All right. Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you given a deposition before?
I have.
Okay. About how many times?
Once.
Once. Okay. Are you, what's your current position?
I'm the superintendent of the Wauwatosa School District.
Okay. And before that, did you work for Milwaukee Public Schools anytime?
No.
No. Okay. What was your job prior to being the superintendent at Wauwatosa?
I was the superintendent in the Clark County School District in Athens, Georgia.
Okay. And before that, what were you?
I worked for the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. I skipped over that one job. So I worked for the Department of Public Instruction for about 10 months. And then prior to that, I was the superintendent in Athens, Georgia.
Okay, and who was the superintendent at that time at the Department of Public Instruction?
Carolyn Stanford was the state superintendent.
Okay. Okay. And so about what year would that have been?
It would have been 2020, 2021.
Okay. When did you become the superintendent at Wauwatosa?
I was appointed in April, May of 2021.
Okay. And how did you come to get that position?
I went through an interview process.
Did you apply for it?
I did.
Okay. Why did you apply for it?
Because I believe in the Wauwatosa School District. I've worked there prior when I was a director of human resources, and always felt that it was a gem of a community and had the potential to be the best school district in the state of Wisconsin.
Okay.
That's why I applied.
Now I understand. So and I may not be clear exactly on your history, so I'm going to just try to go back a little bit further then.
Sure.
Okay. So what was the last educational institute that you graduated from?
Cardinal Stritch University.
Okay. And
in 2005 with a doctoral degree.
Okay. So, and then after that, what was your first position?
When you say first position, what do you mean, sir?
Job.
So I'll briefly, maybe to expedite this.
Please.
I earned my bachelor's degree from Concordia University in May of 1994.
Okay.
Following that, I became a classroom teacher at Homestead High School from 1994 to 1997. In 1997, I became an assistant principal at Nicolay High School. I served as the assistant principal at Nicolay High School from 1997 to 1999. During the 1999-2000 school year, I was appointed to associate principal. It's a high school union district, so it's a one school district. So to make me the associate principal was, in essence, I did the day-to-day work and was, in essence, the principal of that school.
Of Nicolay?
Of Nicolay High School.
Okay.
In 2000, I became the principal of Mapledale Middle School. Mapledale Middle School is a 4-8 building, 4th grade through 8th grade. I served as the principal of Mapledale for 2 years, from the 2000-2001, and then again 2001 to 2002 school year.
And that's in the same district as Nicolay?
It is not. Nicolay is a high school union district. Mapledale Indian Hill is a K-8 school district. Okay. So it's a very different school system.
Now I understand. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
In 2002, I became the director of human resources in the Wauwatosa School District. I served in that role for 3 years. My last year in Wauwatosa, I was appointed by the Board of Education, this is the school board, as co-interim superintendent. and I served in that role with a woman by the name of Pat Lupke. And so for the 2004-2005 school year, I served as both the Director of Human Resources and the co-interim superintendent. In 2005, I returned to the Mequon-Thingsville School District as the Assistant Superintendent, served in that role for 3 years, then became the Superintendent in 2008. Served the Mequon-Thingsville School District as Superintendent from 2008 to 2017. In 2017, I was appointed Superintendent of a school district called Clark County in Athens, Georgia. Served in that role until December of 2019, and then I became an employee of the Department of Public Instruction in the fall of 2020. Served in that role until I was appointed superintendent in Wauwatosa.
Why'd you leave? Thank you for that. I appreciate that expedition there. Why did you leave Clark County?
There were some community issues and misalignment with my values and other things happening.
Okay. And then before you said that you were co-interim superintendent at Wauwatosa.
I was.
Okay, and what does co-interim mean?
I shared the role of of superintendent with another person. I was. It was my third year in the district. The school board didn't feel that I had been in the district long enough to be named just the lone interim superintendent for the year. I was also, now looking back on it, that was quite a few years ago. I was fairly young, and so the way that it was constructed, I was more of the external superintendent. I worked with the school board, the veteran staff member. The way that we configured it, at least at the onset, was she handled more of the internal day-to-day staff relations items. The reality of it was we shared it. We shared the duties together as a team.
And who was that person?
Her name was Pat Lupke.
Oh, okay. Okay. And did you both become interim co-superintendents at the same time?
We did. So the school board felt that they named both of us in the role of interim superintendent, hence the word co-interim superintendent.
Okay. And what was her role before she became?
She was the director of student services, so she oversaw special education and other items.
Okay. And you went from human resources to
I
co-superintendent?
did both that year.
Okay.
The school board asked me to do 2 jobs.
Were you underfilling, or what? How would you classify it?
The superintendent left. The
Right.
superintendent, his name was Robert Slaughterback. He left the school system late in 2004. It was too late for the school board to try to do a search. And I think they felt comfortable with our leadership and Ms. Lupke and I.
What are we talking about late 2004? When was that?
When I say late, I mean in the school district realm of things. So I would say the late spring.
Okay. So that would have been outside of the normal superintendent hiring?
I think he may have been appointed in May, late April, May. And then by that time, that's really difficult to try to find, to do a superintendent search at that point in time. So typically people, when I say people, school systems look to interim superintendents at that time.
Okay, did he leave suddenly or something else?
He didn't leave suddenly. I think the interview process in Mequon-Thingsville just moved at their pace. And when he was offered the position, he left.
I understand. Okay, I appreciate that. So, your first role, though, at Wauwatosa was in HR, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And at that time, did you start having contact with the school board?
Yes.
Okay. And a regular contact, or can you describe that contact, please?
So a director of human resources is part of the executive cabinet of the school system. So yes, I attended all school board meetings and I had contact with the school board.
Okay. Now, presently, there's a director of human resources at TOSA, right?
It's under a different title. It's now called Chief of Talent, but yes, it's the same position.
And that person also attends all school board meetings?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, they attend all school board meetings.
What's that person's name?
Her name is Sarah Zelazowski.
You're going to have to spell that.
Yeah, you can do it at the time or at the end.
Let's do it right now.
Zelazoski.
I appreciate that. Thank you. All right. So, let's just talk about, did you have any training in human resources before you took that job on at?
No formal. I did not have any formal training in human resources before I took the job.
Okay. Did you have experience?
Yes.
Okay. What was
Yeah,
that experience?
So my experience prior to becoming the director of human resources, that I did participate in collective bargaining meetings and efforts. That's when collective bargaining was still prominent in Wisconsin. I oversaw and dealt with unions and managed collective bargaining agreements.
And that's as principal and assistant principal?
That was as a principal and assistant principal.
Okay. And how did you did you apply for that job? How did you get that job?
I applied for the job.
Okay. And was it an increase in pay, or why? Let me put that another way. Why did you apply for that job?
I always had an aspiration of being a superintendent. So the next step in the process after being a principal is to take on district level positions.
Okay. So then let's talk about your licensure at that point. I assume you had a teaching license at some point?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then
I still hold a teaching license.
and then to be an administrator, when did you get your administrator's license, if you have one?
Sure. So I received my administrative license in 1997 after I completed my master's degree at Cardinal Stritch University.
Okay. And that's the same license you hold now?
It is.
Okay. And I'm sorry, because I'm just working on the timelining. So after 90, that's when you started to become assistant principal?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So part of the reason to move to become director of HR was to get on the superintendent track, is that right?
Was.
Okay. And do you feel, did you accomplish that in that role?
Yes.
Okay, why?
I gained a lot of experience in dealing with school boards and community, and it culminated in me after 3 years, candidly after 2 years, it culminated in the board being impressed with my skill set to the point where they made me a co-interim superintendent.
Okay. So, but then you didn't go from co-interim superintendent directly to superintendent at TOSA, right?
No, I applied for the position. Maybe I can fill the gap. So the Wauwatosa School District then conducted a formal search for superintendent in the spring of 2005. I was asked by the search firm to apply. I did apply. I was a finalist for the role. I think there was 3 finalists, but I wasn't selected. They selected someone who had prior superintendent experience. I didn't have that experience.
Okay. So, because you just had co-superintendent experience?
I just had that co-interim superintendent experience.
Okay. Okay. And so who was picked at that time?
His name is Phil Ertl.
Okay. Can you spell that, please?
ERTL is the last name, Phil.
Appreciate that. Okay. And so he was picked, and then you went to Clark County?
No. So in 2005, I then was offered the ability to become the assistant superintendent for educational services in the Mequon-Thiensville School District.
Okay. Okay.
So in order to fulfill my goal of becoming a superintendent and not simply having district level experience as an HR director, I went to Mequon-Thiensville, which is considered one of the better school districts in the state of Wisconsin, to lead their curricular and instructional program, in addition to working with human resources. So that's why I took that job, and it did profit me a great deal in my overall goal
Okay.
of being a superintendent.
And do you have any educational experience in curriculum instruction prior to that?
My master's degree prepared me. I have a license in being a curriculum director. So I took courses in my master's program that I graduated from in 1997.
Okay.
And was also in my doctoral program. I had just finished my doctoral program in 2005.
Okay. So then let's talk about the actual role of being superintendent. I see that you have training. Did you have any education that specifically in that job as superintendent?
Yes.
What was that education?
Well, the doctoral program that I completed in May of 2005 provided leadership courses, and I think there was, I don't recall, but I believe that there was actually a class on the superintendency as well.
So other than that one class, what specific class or education did you receive in your doctoral program that was targeted towards being a superintendent?
Was leadership training.
And what does that mean?
Well, it provides you different perspectives on how to lead, how to manage change, and how to manage organizations.
Okay.
Which is usual and customary for training for superintendents.
Okay, and how did that happen?
There isn't an official superintendent school like lawyers go to law school.
Okay. But ultimately, the qualification for being a superintendent is to be voted superintendent by a board, right?
Well, I think there's a myriad of things that people look at in terms of what qualifies you to be a superintendent. Do you have prior teaching experience? I had teaching experience. I taught successfully for 3 years at Homestead High School as a social studies teacher. Do you have experience running a school building? Yes, I had experience running not only a high school, but a 4 through 8 middle school. So that was something that I could reference. Do you have experience working in the district office leading whole system change? Yes. I had experience being a director of human resources and also served as the assistant superintendent for educational services. Do you hold a terminal degree, a doctoral degree? That at least that used to be a prerequisite for school districts in hiring their superintendents. Yes, I held a terminal degree. So from the prerequisites that most school boards look to for if you are qualified to be a superintendent, I met those qualifications.
How about working with the school board? Did you have experience in that?
I'm going to object vague as to time. Subject to that, you may answer.
You cannot serve in the role of director of human resources or assistant superintendent for educational services and not work with a school board. So yes, I worked with school boards.
Okay. And prior to becoming superintendent at Wauwatosa, did you have any training in Robert's Rules of Order?
And what, I'm sorry?
Robert's Rules of Order.
Not formally, no, not through my educational experience, no.
Okay. And subsequent to that, have you had any training?
I've read Robert's Rules of Order, but no, I have not received formal training.
Okay. And how about Wisconsin public records law? Have you received any formal training into that?
Through the training as provided to school boards.
What does that mean?
That means when the Wisconsin School Board Association has worked with school boards in the past, I've sat in on those trainings. But no, I have not received any formal training on open meeting laws.
Wisconsin, is that WASB, Wisconsin Association of School Boards? Is that-
Yes.
Okay. Okay. What about open meetings?
No formal training.
Okay. Have you sat in on any?
I have.
Okay. And do you, based on your sitting in on these, did you receive any accreditation? Or?
No, sir.
No. Okay. So let's get sort of school board specific here. Are you familiar with the administrative policies of Wauwatosa?
I'm familiar with the board policies of Wauwatosa, yes.
Okay. And so based on that understanding, how is direction given to you from the school board?
Object to the form, vague. Answer if you can.
I don't understand the question.
Okay. Are you ever given direction from the school board?
From the school board?
Well, let's start from basics. Do you know what the Wauwatosa School Board is?
I do know what the
Okay.
Wauwatosa School Board is, yes.
Can you explain what that is, please?
It's a governing body that's elected by the electorate to provide oversight to the superintendent, who is the chief executive officer of the school district, and they govern through school board policy.
Okay. And is it composed of members or something else?
They're composed of members. The policy also states that the school board president has really broad authority in terms of developing agendas.
Great. And we'll get into agendas in just a second here. But just in terms of your understanding of the members, do the members, or how are the policies enacted by the school board?
Object to the form, vague. Subject to that, you may answer.
I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
Okay. You know what policies are?
I do know what policies are.
Okay. So am I correct that the school board, let's say, enacts policies that the school district follows?
Yes.
Okay. How are those policies enacted?
How are policies enacted in the school district? Is that your question?
Could you please repeat the question?
How are those policies enacted?
What policies?
The school board's policies.
There are literally a lot of policies in our policy catalog, so you would have to be specific.
Okay. Well, let me be more clear. Are those policies enacted by a vote of the school board or something else?
Which policies?
Any policy.
Do you have a specific policy that you're referencing?
Okay. So we'll just back up 1 second here.
Sure.
So the subject here is all policies.
I'm
Okay?
sorry, say that again.
All policies, every policy created by the Wauwatosa School Board. Okay?
Okay.
Are those policies, all of them, created by a vote of the school board? Or in any case, are they not created by a vote of the school board?
I'm going to object to the form. Subject to that, you may answer.
Policies are enacted upon a majority vote of the board,
How do you know that?
because that's how policies are, that's how the board functions in order to have anything enacted. Not only a policy, but even hiring a principal that is contingent and subject to the majority vote of the full board.
But does that mean your work experience or does that mean something else?
I'm going to object to the form.
Okay.
I don't understand.
My question to you was, how do you know that? And from what you just described to me, is that you describing work experience or you describing some other form of knowledge?
I'm going to object to the form. You may answer subject to that.
My knowledge of Robert's Rules of Order, any governing body you function and enact items based on the majority vote of a board.
Okay.
Or a governing body.
And based on your knowledge, does the Wauwatosa School Board bylaws have any control over whether or not there's a vote taken on any policy?
Object to the form. Subject to that, you may answer.
I don't understand the question.
Okay. So I guess we've established that you've got knowledge based on your experience working with the school board that they vote and on policies, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any other basis that you form that knowledge or opinion that the school board votes on policies?
Object to the form. Subject to that, you may answer.
I don't understand the question.
Okay. What about the question don't you understand?
Object
The form of it. the form of the question. I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
Okay, but you understand all the words?
No, I don't
Okay,
understand your words.
Stop. We're not going to do that in this deposition. I object. Do not answer the question of, do you understand all my words? Next question, please.
Okay. Can you repeat the second to last question so we can be clear on what that one was?
Is there any other basis that you form that knowledge or opinion that the school board votes on policies?
And you don't understand that question?
Could you repeat it, please?
Is there any other basis that you form that knowledge or opinion that the school board votes on policies?
I object to the form of the question because I believe I answered your question in the prior question that you provided to me. Ultimately, I shared in the prior response that I'm aware that a governing body has to approve anything. I think I referenced in that prior question the approval of hiring a principal to policies. You have locked in on the policy piece. That's great. There's a majority vote of the board that typically is required for enaction of policy. So I believe I answered your question.
Okay. Do you, as your role as superintendent of the Wauwatosa School District, do you oversee the production of public records by the Wauwatosa School District?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And how do you oversee that?
I work with our technology director because typically we're pulling open records via email. So I work with that individual. I also work with our legal counsel to ensure that if there's anything that needs to be redacted, it is redacted. So that's how it's an involved process. I don't unilaterally make the decision on what records are responsive or not.
Okay. So when someone makes a public records request to the district, are those requests directed at you or somebody else?
They're initially directed to me, and then as I shared with you,
Okay.
there are other individuals who are involved. The director of technology, our legal team, there are various other parties involved.
I got it. What's the name of the director of?
His name is Jamie Price.
Hold on. Damon, do me a favor. Let Ben get his full question out.
Okay.
It'll help her do her job. Why don't we
Okay,
start that
sorry.
one over? Go ahead.
No problem. So what is the name of the technology director, please?
Jamie, Jamie,
Okay.
Price.
With an E, Price, Price?
Yes.
Okay. And for the public records, who's the legal counsel that you're talking
Bulow
to?
Vetter.
Okay. And what's the attorney's name?
Well, there's various attorneys that we work with at Bulow Vetter to handle these situations.
I understand. Let's talk about a specific public records request. Did you get a public records request from Fox 6 News at any time?
And object to the form. It's overly broad, but subject to that, you can answer.
We've received various open records requests from Fox 6. as a
Great.
media outlet.
And so then we'll focus in on that. So, but you're aware of those. They would have all come to you while you were the superintendent, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And were there any Fox 6 public records requests related to Avid that you were aware of?
Related to, I'm sorry.
Avid, AVID.
Yes.
Okay. About when did those occur?
As soon as I arrived in my role, I think as soon as it would have been July, August of 2021.
Okay. And with that time frame in mind, who at Bulow Vetter would you have consulted regarding public records?
Her name is Alana Leffler.
Okay. And just her?
That's what I recall.
Okay. And do you recall what the subject of the public records request from Fox 6 was at that time?
I don't recall.
Hold on, you're referring to the one in the fall of 2021?
Exactly.
Okay. I don't have an
re-
objection to that. Please
I
proceed.
don't recall.
Okay. So you don't recall what they were asking for? to
I
be
can't
clear?
remember.
Okay. And what about that public records request made you think it was related to Avid?
Because what I do remember is that there were requests about our payments to Avid, if I remember correctly.
Okay. And since it's a public records request, would you believe that they were asking for records related to your payments to Avid?
To the payments that the Wauwatosa School District made to Avid or others, there were a number of different requests that came from different media outlets, but
Sure, but we're just focusing on the one from Fox 6 now, correct?
there were many requests from Fox 6.
Okay.
There wasn't just one.
About Avid.
Yes.
Okay. But you are clear, at least based on your recollection here today, that there was at least one related to the district's payments to Avid, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you explain how that, the production of the public records request was handled?
I'm going to have you fully answer that question. In your answer, I do not want you to reveal any communications
Okay.
you had with legal counsel. With that in mind and avoiding that, you should fully answer his question.
I appreciate that.
Yep.
So your question is, how did we respond to the open records request?
Yes, and again, just to emphasize here, without saying, what if any attorney gave you legal advice without telling me what that advice was.
We searched for any responsive records and provided them.
Okay, so how does the search happen? Let's start with that.
We look for keywords. Mr. Price looks for keywords, and he does email searches. In the case of the payment open record request, we also worked with our business office to pull any prior payments.
Okay, and I want to go back to the business office just for a second, but those keywords, how are those keywords developed?
They're developed by the actual language from the open records requester,
Okay, and who develops them?
Mr. Price, and or legal counsel.
Okay, and does Mr. Price directly consult with legal counsel?
Yes.
Okay, and how does he do?
I've taken the approach. That it's not my role to try to hone in on the keywords. I think it's important for the director of technology to identify what the keywords are because he has to do the search for emails. I rely on legal counsel. So when I arrived, I made it a point where I was impartial, and either the director of technology would look at the actual request and determine the keywords, or the director of technology worked with legal counsel. I don't believe as the records custodian that I should be in the position of being the arbiter. There will be times where I may consult with those two other entities, but I think it's a slippery. This is just an opinion of one in my experience as being a district administrator and a superintendent. It's a slippery slope when there's one person who is making those determinations and then directing legal counsel or technology.
Okay, but and just back to this specific example here, are you aware of whether or not the technology director contacted legal counsel?
I don't recall. I'm assuming he did.
Okay, why?
Because that's our process.
Okay, and that would have been Alana Leffler?
Yes.
Okay. And have you ever talked to the technology director about how, because I understand what you're saying, that you're taking a hands-off role there, but have you ever talked to him about how the process of developing keywords should happen?
I wouldn't call it a hands-off approach. I would call it more of an impartial approach of ensuring that the process is as transparent and unfiltered as possible. So that would be I wouldn't call it hands-off.
Okay.
And I do know that there's quite the conversation between legal counsel and Mr. Price, because at the time we didn't have a very efficient way of pulling the records from email and getting the records from the business office. So I know there was a lot of back and forth of downloading files and then Mr. Price sending those files over to the legal counsel, and then they had to redact it. It was really difficult. So I know that there was a lot of discussion.
Okay, and we're talking about redactions. What kind of redactions are we talking about?
Well, in typically with an open records request if there are student names or names of individuals that are not responsive or pertinent to the request. Those names are redacted from
Okay.
the information.
And are you making that decision?
And so upon my arrival, as I stated earlier, I decided that that should not be my decision. That should be a lawyer's decision. And so the legal team at Bulow Vetter has served in that role of identifying what's redacted and what's not.
So when you're saying unfiltered, are you talking about the technology director, or are you talking about the Bulow Vetter or something else?
When I used the word unfiltered in two questions prior, what I was referencing is that I have seen the process of open records evolved over time. And there was a time period, I believe, when we were not as technologically savvy in districts where district administrators, superintendents made the unilateral decision of this is what here's the responsive records and here are the records that are not responsive. I have always, so you ask questions about my background. Here's why I believe I'm qualified.
Okay.
So I worked with a woman by the name of Mary Hubacher and a man by the name of Mark Vetter. In fact, Mr. Vetter is the Vetter of Bulow Vetter.
These are attorneys, correct?
They are school attorneys. And
Okay.
so during that very opportune time when I was the Director of Human Resources, I learned a lot around what do you do with open records and the such. I was always trained that you should engage your legal counsel to make the determination on what is redactable and what's not. That you're making a really big, you're taking a big risk and you're making some unilateral decisions as a school administrator when you're making that decision. And so I've always operated from the perspective of legal counsel should be the individuals who are making that decision on redaction, because if you're ever challenged around what was redacted and what's not, I don't want to ever be in a deposition where someone is saying, did you make that decision, Dr. Means, or did legal counsel make the decision? I always want to always give the response of the latter. Legal counsel made the decision, and then they have a basis for their decision.
So it's fair to say that the district always consults legal counsel when producing public records?
Since July of 2021, and I'm sorry for not letting him fully answer the question, or say the question.
You probably anticipated a lot there, so I appreciate that. We always admire efficiency around here, I think. Okay, good. And has that, from the time that you started as full superintendent until now, has that law firm always been Bulow Vetter or somebody else?
It has always, the law firm for the Wauwatosa School District has been Bulow Vetter since I've arrived as general counsel. So let me be very clear. School districts work with a number of different law firms. And just from I know you know this, Mr. Cross, but just for the record's sake, school districts we work with Quarles and Brady, and had a lot of work with Quarles and Brady because the district was coming off the heels of a referendum from 2018. Quarles and Brady, their specialty is referendum law. We work with an insurance carrier when we have certain difficult legal situations. That's why we have the great opportunity to work with Ms. Levinsky and her law firm. And ironically, I don't know, all I will say is that my first 6 to 8 months on the job, there were quite a few legal issues that required us to utilize our insurance carrier, Abbott among them. And then we have something that we call general counsel. And general counsel is where you are basically working in the overall arch of a school system. You either are working with general counsel on 3 areas. General board governance, how you handle board governance issues, policies, and so forth. Human resources, and special education, pupil services.
Is pupil services and special education synonymous?
They're not synonymous, but they're in the same category. So in the world of a school district, if you have an expulsion, that falls into the area of more pupil services.
Okay. And when you said board governance, is one of those things open meetings law?
Yes.
Okay. So it's also fair to say that the attorney for open meetings law throughout your entire time as full superintendent would have been Bulow Vetter?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And was there ever a time when that representation was in question?
I'm going to object to the form because I just don't understand it. But go ahead. If you understand it, please answer.
I think I understand, but I would appreciate clarity if you could expand on your question.
Okay. Well, let's say if you were going to consult on public records today, would you contact Alana Leffler or somebody else?
Our general counsel firm was Bulow Vetter when I arrived. The general counsel that we worked with at the school in the school system was Alana Leffler. Once it was a very crisis-filled first year for me as a superintendent. There were a lot of different crises. We didn't have a director of human resources, the role that I used to fill. So I filled that my first year as superintendent. Tends to be a theme, I guess, in terms of doing multiple jobs in Wauwatosa, but I digress. Upon having a full-time chief of talent, we started the process of putting out a request for proposal for legal services. So I should not presume what your question is or where you're moving with the question, but what I will tell you is that within this school year, we did go through a process for a request for proposal, and we have decided to retain Bulow Vetter, but our general counsel is no longer Ms. Leffler.
Okay. And who made that decision?
It was a team effort. Our chief financial officer, Mr. Brightman, Bright spelled like Bright Man. His first name is Keith, and Ms. Zelazowski and I, the three of us made that decision.
Okay. And if you can just remind me again what Ms. Zelazowski's role is?
She's the chief of talent. In essence, she runs the human resources.
Okay. I'm beginning to catch on to HR means talent.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, but to focus in on that decision, I didn't hear you mention any board members. Isn't that right?
That's right.
Okay. Why was the board not involved in that decision, if you know?
Because when we decided to retain our current counsel, there was no need for us to engage. Well, let me back up. The decision to retain Bulow Vetter was an administrative decision. But prior to that, we were going to involve legal, or we plan to have school board members part of the RFP process.
Okay.
We did plan to have school board members part of the RFP process, but through the fact that there were multiple lawsuits and disputes among the board, and that there were certain firms that had responded to the RFP that were also involved in these disputes. If I remember correctly, our chief of talent, Ms. Zelazowski, sought an opinion on who should participate and who shouldn't participate on the board, and we landed in a place of it would be most prudent to not have school board members in the process because we were in the throes of multiple legal disputes.
Okay. And I'm going to try to unpack that slowly here, but I just want to focus on a couple of things first. So, Ms. Zelazowski got an opinion. Is that right?
Yes.
Who did she get an opinion from?
Mr. Meier, I believe, requested some type of opinion on how should we proceed.
Okay.
And I can't remember his name. Miss Dietrich, I think.
Dean Dietrich?
Dean Dietrich, I think his name is.
School lawyer.
Yeah, it's a small world.
Yeah.
And so he provided the counsel, which after
Okay.
receiving it, we thought it was really good.
Okay, and that was, thank you for reminding me of that question. When you're saying we, who are you talking about?
When I say we, I mean Ms. Zelazowski, Mr. Brightman, and I, in terms of we were the subcommittee that was starting to look at responses to our request for proposal.
Okay, but within that committee, you're the superintendent, right? And you've got the ability to, can you hire or fire Ms. Zelazowski, for example?
No,
Check to the form.
but I
I
appreciate
think you can answer that. Go ahead and answer.
No, because based on your earlier questions, ultimately I have to present it to the board for a majority vote. So the superintendent doesn't have carte blanche unilateral decision making. The superintendent can always make recommendations.
Okay, but so in terms of how you couldn't fire Ms. Zelazowski, how do you know that?
Because ultimately, I can make a recommendation for the dismissal of an administrator or staff member, but in a non-renewal, which is a legal process, and in my training in school law, there's a hearing and a process that is cited in statute under Chapter 118. So under Chapter 118 of the Wisconsin statutes, there's still an opportunity for the full governing board to weigh in. So no, it's a misnomer that the superintendent has authority to simply hire and fire at will.
Okay, so other than that at-will power, is it fair to say that you've got other employment power over Ms. Zelazowski?
Object to the form, vague. Subject to that, you may answer.
I do evaluate Ms. Zelazowski.
Okay, and also the CFO too, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. And can you remind me that person's name again?
Brightman. Mr. Brightman.
Brightman, okay. Spelled just like Bright, got it. Okay. So, but the three of you then got an opinion, and the opinion led you to not have the board members be involved. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And so,
And Mr. Cross, I want to just put an addendum on that.
Please.
Because of the disputes and the multiple disputes that were happening among the board, we weren't quite sure how to proceed. It really made things difficult. So yes, we made the decision that it would be better for us to bring if there was going to be a change in carrier or service provider, to bring that to the board once we arrived at that point. And just to put a bow on this, Mr. Cross, the board then acted on our recommendation to retain Bulow Vetter moving forward through a consent agenda item that was voted on by the entire board.
was that in public session or
It
something?
was in public session.
Okay.
So the full board did eventually have a say-so, which governing boards are supposed to do. It was just disappointing that we were unable to have board voice in the process on the front end, but that was based on the advice from Mr. Dietrich. That wasn't prudent to do based on the different legal disputes happening.
Okay, you've anticipated so many of my questions, which I appreciate. But then I think there's one thing that's still unclear. You keep referencing a bunch of disputes. Can you explain to me what those disputes are?
Yes, sir. So I think once we were in the fall of 2022, there was a dispute that was before corporate counsel, Milwaukee County Corporate Counsel, if I'm remembering correctly, regarding how the board handled, and I can't remember, it's a shame, I can't remember the details of that dispute. There was also a request by Mr. Meier. There was he made a request to have a special board meeting to rescind the human growth and development curriculum. So there were just a number of different disputes between board members that were that clouded things.
Okay, and the ones that I understood just now, again, are actions that Mr. Meier took. Is that fair to say?
Check to the form. Go ahead and answer subject to that.
I think we have to be careful and fair to Mr. Meier. He brought them. I wouldn't say it was Mr. Meier bringing them. I think he either brought them because he felt philosophically the board did something wrong, or he was bringing it on behalf of the community. He's the vessel, if you will, of those complaints. But I don't view it as Mr. Meier being the ointment or the impediment, I should say, of the situation. I wouldn't view it that way. I would view it more as he's the vessel of the concerns.
Okay, and I appreciate that clarity, but even with that in mind then, to what extent were there, because you used the word disputes.
Yes.
So I want to understand how that answer relates back to your the word disputes. Can you explain that to me?
Well, so when there are differences of opinion between a governing board that rises to the level of documenting them either through the request for a special meeting, as the case was in the fall of 2022, or pursuing something with the Milwaukee County Corporate Council, when you have those types of disputes and they're in writing, that's highly unusual for school boards.
Okay, and that's what about it is unusual?
School boards typically don't have those level of public disputes.
Okay, so I mean, is it fair to say that it's unusual because Mike Meier is a board member?
No.
Object to the form. Hold on. Object to the form. Subject to that. You've answered.
Yes, absolutely. I would not say that, and I'm not implying that at all. What I am sharing with you is that it is unusual.
Okay.
There are 421 school districts in the state of Wisconsin, and the type of disputes we've had in Wauwatosa are unique.
Okay, so let's go back to AVID then.
Okay.
Okay. Do you know what AVID is?
AVID is an acronym. It stands for Advancement via Individual Determination. It is a series of support systems and professional learning that this nonprofit agency, national agency, provides to schools and school districts.
Okay. And was there a relationship between AVID and Wauwatosa?
Yes.
What was that relationship?
The Wauwatosa School District was in the, prior to my arrival in July of 2021, were in the process of implementing AVID to the point where if I recall, the board voted in the affirmative multiple times to fund AVID, to get the process moving in the school system.
Was there a contract between the district and AVID?
There was.
Okay. Is there still a contract between the district and AVID?
No, sir, I ended that.
Why?
I did not feel that it was I didn't feel that it was the appropriate process to use based on so much of the community concern around AVID. There was a lot of concern in terms of how the system was brought into the school district. There was a lot of concern about its effectiveness. There was concern on if the implementation of AVID followed our district policy around implementation of curriculum. There were just a lot of concerns, and so in the midst of all the other issues that I was dealing with in my first year, I did not feel that it was prudent for us to continue to invest in that system.
Did you share any of those concerns?
I did. I actually shared those concerns, I believe, at a December 2021 school board meeting where I, in essence, said, if this is, there's so much acrimony around this, I do not believe that this is prudent for us to continue to continue. I remember I made that statement because we were voting on continuing funding. I brought forth a recommendation to continue funding for Avid, and it was a very minimal cost. It was not at the same level or cost as prior approvals of the board had made. And so during this debate among the board, I just made the statement, you know what, it's probably best that we move away from Avid. If we're having so much difficulty to approve a minimal amount for your approval, then it's probably best for us to not continue. That was not a popular decision with teachers and families who believed in Avid, but in the best interest of the community, I withdrew it.
Okay. And based on your job duty as a superintendent, did you come across any direct evidence that supported your recommendation not to continue with Avid?
Object to the form vague as to direct evidence. Subject to that, you can answer.
I don't understand the question.
Okay. Did you ever come across any documents that supported your belief that the district should not continue with Avid?
No. No documents that said that would have led me to believe that we shouldn't continue with Avid. It was more of a reading the situation and how it had grown in our district. It became a very contentious situation where we were being featured on the news. It had nothing to do with me. But I was now the new superintendent, and the community was, in essence, saying, so what are you going to do about it? So that was the challenge. It was more of a, you're now the superintendent, things happened in the past, how are you going to address this moving forward? And so nothing direct, nothing documented that led me to that decision.
Okay. And what about those news articles made you give that recommendation?
Well, there were news stories. I think there may have been one newspaper story on it. They were detrimental to the school system.
In what way?
I think it put us in a bad light in terms of, was there something nefarious happening with contracts and the implementation of a very expensive program or not?
Okay. Upon learning that information, did you investigate on whether there was anything nefarious happening with contracts?
The school board in November of 2021, I believe it was November, they directed me through an affirmative vote to start the process of an investigation. And so I contacted the Wauwatosa Police Department. And so the Wauwatosa Police Department, they investigated along with, we hired an auditor to come in and check all of our different records. So,
Okay.
and I believe there was a statement made by the board.
So,
I want to check myself. I know there was a statement by the board in November of 2021 around the investigation. I don't remember if they voted on it or not, so I do want to apologize for that. I think they did, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't want to be factual.
appreciate that.
Yes.
Do you, prior to November, the formal decision in November, did you take any steps to investigate the Avid contract?
I started pulling information
When did that happen?
as soon as I would say maybe September, October of 2021.
Okay.
I started in July.
Okay, so what information were you pulling?
There was an opinion letter that was provided to my predecessor, Dr. Ertl, from Alana Leffler, indicating if the assistant superintendent for educational services, her name was Kristen Bowers, if she had the ability to be part of the contractual process.
Okay, did she? Did Kristen Bowers have that ability?
Object to the form, but subject to that, you can answer.
I believe you're asking, did she have the ability to be part of the process of securing Avid? I think there was some very unique language that allowed her to be part of discussions, but not part of contract negotiations. I can't remember or recall the actual language, but there wasn't a bright line in terms of here's what she can do, here's what she can't do. It was not as definitive as I think anyone would have preferred to have had.
Okay, and did you request Ms. Leffler to write this letter?
No, it was this opinion letter was written before my arrival.
Do you know when it was written?
I don't remember the date on that opinion letter.
But I mean, was it several months before that, or?
It was at least a year or more before.
Okay, and do you know, based on that timing, do you know who would have asked Ms. Leffler to write that letter?
I believe Dr. Ertl.
Okay, and that's the previous superintendent?
Yes, my predecessor.
Okay, okay. And when you started in July of that year, was Kristen Bauer still employed by the district?
She was.
Okay. At some time after you started as superintendent, did she no longer work with the district?
She, if I remember correctly, by early November, she took a leave of absence.
Okay.
And then subsequently, the school district and Ms. Bowers worked on a settlement of her contractual obligations / rights as an employee in the district.
Okay. Has anybody ever asked you for a copy of that contract?
Her contract, her employment contract?
Yeah, object to
Separation.
the form, separation agreement?
Some people might say separation agreement. I'll say a contract, also called the separation agreement. We're on the same page now?
Yeah, I was just confirming, you're not talking about her employment contract.
We're not. We're
Got
talking
it.
about a separation
I don't
agreement.
remember, Mr. Cross, if there was a request, an open records request for her separation agreement or
Okay.
not.
Even other than open records, was there any request for that?
That's what I'm referencing. I can't remember if there was an open records request for her separation agreement. I'm not sure.
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to repeat myself. I just want to be clear we're talking about the same thing. So I get it that there's no open records request, or you couldn't remember if there was an open records request. I'm saying, can you remember some other request that's not open records?
About
This contract?
her
The
separation agreement.
Yes.
I don't recall.
Okay. And you've seen this contract?
Yes, I have seen the separation agreement.
Okay. And do you believe it's fair?
Object to the form. Answer if you can.
I don't think I can answer it. All I know is that the board in the affirmative approved it.
Okay, so you know that it was approved, and you've seen the terms, but you're unable to form an opinion as to whether it's fair or not?
Again, object to the form.
I don't think it's appropriate for me to weigh in on the fairness or unfairness of it.
Okay. So you said you filed a police complaint about, actually, let me back up one second. Are you aware of any connection between Miss Bowers and Avid?
Yes.
What is that connection?
Her husband, Brett Bowers, works for the national organization of AVID.
And when did you learn that?
I knew it upon my hire as superintendent in July of 2021.
How did you know that?
As in the legal community, the educational leadership community is a small one. Mr. Bowers is a former employee of mine when I was the superintendent in the Mequon-Thiensville School District, as he was the principal of Homestead High School. After I left, he then also left Homestead and became a full-time employee for Abbott, you know things when people are in the same field.
Okay, and just going back to Homestead, because what was your relationship to him at Homestead?
He was my direct report. He was a principal for me.
Okay, so you were his supervisor.
Yes.
Okay, that clears that up. Okay. So, and based on that knowledge back in July, did you think that there was any reason or anything inappropriate about the relationship between Miss Bauer and working for the district and Mr. Bauer working for Avid?
Am I allowed to give my opinion
You
or
can give
just
your
fact?
opinion, just make sure you're preferencing that it is your opinion.
This is my opinion.
Thank you.
I believe that it would have been best served for the Wauwatosa School District if Avid had found a way to create more separation between the work that Mr. Bowers provided and the services that Avid provided. I think it was, in my opinion, it was close.
Okay.
It was. I think the relationship was close. I think Ms. Bauer. I want to also preface this by saying that I believe Kristen Bowers and Brett Bowers are extremely highly professional people, but the appearance is hard, and it's not their fault. And I think it placed everyone, my predecessor, the Wauwatosa School District, everyone in a precarious and difficult position.
Okay.
And ideally, what should have happened is anytime that there were services provided via Avid, there should have been, I would have put more of a firewall up, if you will.
Okay.
It's an opinion of one.
I understand, but the superintendent.
It's an opinion of one because it's important to note because the approval of Avid, I appreciate your question, sir. The approval of Avid and the fact that Avid had gained traction in Wauwatosa happened well before my arrival.
Okay. Did prior to the formal decision to investigate in November, did you speak? I guess we can say between July and November. Did you ever speak with Ms. Bowers about the appearance issue?
No,
Okay, why not?
because in my opinion, being 12 weeks on the job, that would have been an inappropriate conversation to have with an employee I was trying to form a relationship with. While I worked with her husband for years, I had not worked with Mrs. Bowers. And the other component of it was I did not want to, it would have been unfair as a supervisor to presume anything about appearances. It was my job to observe and to see if what that opinion I provided you was actually being manifested in the work that was being shared in the district.
Okay, but at some point you, and maybe I got this wrong, but did you recommend to the board that they investigate Avid in November?
I don't know if I made a clear recommendation. I believe through conversations with the full board, the fact that more and more open records requests were coming, that there was more concern being brought to the board at board meetings, that I think you, as a team of 8, the 7 board members and myself, there was a unified decision that there should be some level of investigation
Okay.
from a transparency standpoint.
Okay, and what minutes can we point to that would identify how that decision was made?
I can't recall.
Okay. And but at some point between July and November, and with however you were aided to come to that decision, you came to the decision that Ms. Bowers should be investigated, correct? Or Avid should be investigated, correct?
Mr. Cross, what I would say through my years of training, that it's not a unilateral decision for a superintendent to say, this is what you should do. That I have been trained, my leadership style is one in which we try to have conversations. And I know that there were a lot of closed session meetings discussing this issue among other personnel issues that were emerging during my first 12 weeks on the job, that led the entire board and myself to come to this conclusion. It was not a unilateral. School districts don't work that way. School districts don't work in a way where the superintendent is a paternal figure and says, this is what you shall do, and then you do it. It's a conversation. And I think through the various open record requests, the various emails that we were receiving from community members around the appearance and the concerns around Avid, I think there were things that were emerging from the open records requests, records that were responsive that did not put the school system in the best light. That's how we landed in this position.
Okay. And let's just focus on first, you said conversation. Who was that conversation with?
The school board,
The school board. Okay.
all 7 members.
And you're saying that you were trained in, let's say, developing policy with the school board? I don't want to put words in your mouth. I just want to understand what we're talking about here.
I've been in leadership training. I've developed skills to lead collaborative conversations.
Okay. And so does that, based on that leadership training, that's going to make you, let's say, seek out collaboration?
I try to seek out collaboration where it is appropriate and it fits best.
Okay. And at some point, the superintendent, though, is the chief executive of the school district, right?
At some point, in terms of the operations,
Okay.
the day-to-day operations, not the governance side of things.
Okay, so just explain to me what your understanding of that distinction is.
Well, the distinction is that the school board has certain powers and authority. They are able to hire and fire and evaluate the superintendent. They pass the school district's budget. They rule on expulsion hearings and non-renewal hearings of employees. They develop policies.
Okay.
They act as a governing body and speak as a whole during school board meetings. The day-to-day operations of the schools belongs to the superintendent. So the distinction is, if there's fighting happening at a middle school, the school board can develop policy to say this is how we want to address fighting, but how we handle the fighting, what type of discipline we levy to students who are fighting, that's an administrative decision.
Okay. And is the investigation of Avid, was that a day-to-day decision or something else?
Object to the form. Go ahead and answer.
That's an interesting question.
If you can.
It's the most interesting question so far today.
All right.
I would say that the public aspect of what was happening with Avid moved it from a day-to-day operational component of things to a governance component. And it moved it from a governance element because people were bringing things to the school board meetings around what are you doing around Avid. If we were looking, it's a really interesting question. If we were looking at it strictly from a governance perspective, someone could make the argument that the Avid issue had nothing to do with the board, and that the board should have said to the new superintendent, Dr. Means, we will let you handle this. That the school board would have said to the community, we are going to let our superintendent come back with recommendations and we'll go from there. But I think it was within the first 10 to 12 weeks that I was on the job. And then when you couple that with, we had other personnel issues happening, it was a whirlwind of a start for me. I humbly state that I don't know if a neophyte superintendent would have lasted last year. They would not have survived what I went through that year. And so your question is really an interesting one from a governance standpoint, that I wonder if the board, in retrospect, has ever had time to step back and reflect on. Candidly, I think we've been moving at such a rapid pace, we haven't. But to your question, in its purest form, what was happening with Avid was an operational issue.
Okay, and let's just move ahead in time, at least in theory, till August of this year. Sorry, of 2022. Can you do that? for me?
August?
August of 2022, right?
Okay.
So at that point, you would have been more, let's say, secure in your role as superintendent. Is that fair to say?
I think superintendents would never use the word secure.
Great. Well, how about you would have had sufficient experience at that point?
I had sufficient experience in July of 2021. I want to be very clear.
I'm floundering all over the place. Okay, if you can help me, I'd appreciate it.
I had a year under my belt in Wauwatosa.
1 year. I
Yes.
got it. Okay. All right.
As superintendent.
And given that period of time in 1 year, and again, thanks for helping me out there.
Sure.
Would you have changed how you handled the, let's say, I'm gonna scratch that. Based on that period of 1 year in time, would you have made a different decision in terms of was the Avid investigation a day-to-day operation or a policy matter?
I'm going to object to the form. Subject to that, you may answer.
So it's another good question. I would suggest and submit to you that there's been so much acrimony in the school district and among the board that I have not had the ability to lead the way that I would want to as a superintendent. It has been a very difficult time. I've had to navigate a lot of different obstacles. And so your question of looking back a year later, would I have handled the Avid situation differently? I think we handled it the best way we could have. And I think it was as transparent as it could have been. I think the thing that I regret, if I'm looking back and looking at regret, a lot of our teachers who believed in the Avid system were very disappointed with the decision that I made in December of 2021 to just say we're moving away from it. Some school board members cited to me that they were surprised that I made that declaration of we just stepped away. So it's been, and I'll go on record as saying I don't know if anyone has acknowledged how difficult of a terrain I've been asked to deal with all the different acrimony that has happened in this school district. No one in the board, on the board or in the community has said, how are you doing?
Okay.
How are you handling this acrimony? How are you handling all of this conflict? How are you continuing to lead our day-to-day school district, understanding that there's been so much conflict? No one's ever asked me that.
Well, how are you handling it?
It's been hard. It's been difficult, Mr. Cross.
Well, and based on that, does that make you more or less likely to go to the board?
Object to the form. You may answer if you can.
I can't answer that question.
Why not?
It's a difficult question.
Okay.
I err on the side of going to the board for things.
Okay. And is that based, have you ever had any conversations with anybody about how you make that dividing line?
The dividing line is what I shared with you earlier. You asked maybe 4 or 5 questions ago, what's the delineation line between what the board does and what the superintendent does? And I know what that bright line is.
But that's what I'm saying. Have you discussed that with anybody?
No, I think the board has been in such acrimony for the last 2 years. We haven't had time to have conversations of what's the role of the board and what's the role of the superintendent. We haven't even been there.
Okay.
As soon as I arrived, we were having conversations about creating settlement agreements for district administrators. We had a school principal leave in October. We had the Avid situation. It has been one crisis after the next. No, I haven't had time. And nor has the board had time to just simply say, so what's our role? How do we want to operate? How do we want to proceed and be a governing board, an effective governing board together? That's been really hard to do.
But given all of that, have you changed your approach on how you bring matters to the board in that time period?
I always work to be as transparent and as open as possible. I'm not withholding things from the board.
No, but has that altered your decision making on terms of what is a day-to-day operation and what is a policy?
No.
Why not?
Check to the form, but go ahead.
I don't understand the why not question.
Okay. Well, you presumably to not you had to have kept your policy and practice the same throughout that entire time. Does that, let me to ask that a different way, does that mean the level of acrimony has stayed the same through consistently or something else?
It has remained pretty consistent in terms of the acrimony among the board, yes.
Okay. And I know we need to take a break, so I just want to be one last question for this time period here.
Sure.
And we have, you were mentioning that there was teachers, some teachers had buy-in with Avid.
Yes.
Did all the teachers have buy-in with Avid?
No.
Why not?
I think some people, it's a great question, good question. I think some people felt that it was being implemented on them by the district.
Okay.
By Ms. Bowers and Dr. Ertl. But what I would say in defense of Dr. Ertl and Mrs. Bowers is anytime you are implementing any district-wide program, it is rare to have 100% buy-in and support for a new system. I have never seen that in all of my years and experience of everyone universally saying, yes, we want this program to be implemented. School districts are large institutions. If you can show me an organization that has over 1,000 employees and is an $85 million a year, has an $85 million a year budget that has universal unity on the implementation of systems, then I would love to know who they are.
Okay. All right, so we're going to pause here for, let's say, 10 minutes. Perfect.
We are off the record at 10:20 a.m. This is the end of Media Unit number 1.
Now, I